I'm going to work through a problem on comparative advantage and absolute advantage. Hopefully you've gone and watched a couple of videos and listened to what they had to say and took your notes and stuff, and that you now understand that even, let's give the United States as an example, even if the United States can make things quicker, faster, better, with less resources, we can still gain from trade. So countries should specialize in the things that they can do with the lowest opportunity cost and then trade for other things. So once again, even if you are a country that can make things better, you're more efficient, you're more productive, you can still gain from trade. So we're going to look at this handout real quick. It shouldn't take us very long to work through it. Hatfields and McCoys don't talk to each other very much. They would rather shoot than smile. The Hatfields, this is important, the Hatfields are better off than the McCoys in every way. It takes only 8 hours for the Hatfields to grow 1 bushel of corn for bread or whiskey, and only 10 hours for the Hatfields to make 1 yard of cloth. The McCoys aren't any more or less shiftless than the Hatfields, but their land is worse and their tools aren't as good. So it takes 15 hours for 1 McCoy to grow 1 bushel of corn and 14 hours for 1 McCoy to make 1 yard of cloth. So the McCoys are worse off than the Hatfields because they have to work longer for everything that they want. Skipping down, they've got a dispute between Ma and Pa. She's thinking they should trade. He doesn't want to. So let's go on to do the math of this and explain why it's important that they do trade and why it would benefit everyone that's involved in this. So let me get this situated. So what we're going to do is to produce corn and cloth, Hatfields must spend, and you go back up there and it says the Hatfields have to spend 8 hours. 8 hours for 1 bushel of corn, and it takes them 10 hours for 1 yard of cloth. So how many hours total would it take them to do 1 bushel of corn and 1 yard of cloth? So we're just going to add those two. So that's just information that you're going to get up there. It says in the directions, 8 hours to grow 1 bushel of corn and 10 hours, no math required. And then if you're going to do total, we're just going to add those two up. So to get 1 bushel of corn and 1 yard of cloth, it's going to take the Hatfields 18 hours. So the McCoys say, it says for the McCoys it takes them 15 hours for 1 bushel of corn, and then it takes them 12 hours for 1 yard of cloth. So once again, that's up in the directions or up in the instructions and the information. No math required to find those. They're up there, and then all you have to do to get your total is we're going to add these two. So we're going to add 15 plus 12 gives us 27 hours. So it's clear here that the Hatfields have an absolute advantage. It takes them less time to make the bushel of corn, and they also have an absolute advantage in making cloth. So for most students, it makes sense when it's clear that one country can do one thing better and the other country can do something different better. But this is talking about when one country can do everything better. It still benefits them. So the next thing, it says if the Hatfields produced only corn and trade 1 bushel of corn for 1 yard of cloth, they would spend. So in order for the Hatfields to make 2 bushels of corn, if we come back up here, if it takes them 8 hours for 1 bushel, we're just going to multiply that times 2, and it's going to give us 16 hours. So the Hatfields can make 2 bushels of corn in 16 hours. How many hours to have 1 bushel of corn and 1 yard of cloth to trade? It's going to be 16 hours. If the McCoys produce only cloth and trade 1 yard of cloth for 1 bushel of corn, they would spend, and it takes them 24 hours, because that's one. If we take, or excuse me, for 1 hour it takes, or for 1 yard, 12 hours. So then for 2 yards, we're going to take this times the 2 to give us our 24 hours. And they're going to trade 1. So they're going to take 1 that they made and trade it for 1 of these bushels of corn. So 24 hours. So let me put this this, and I'm just going to answer these questions. It says if the Hatfields and McCoys specialized in the lowest cost production, will they gain any time? Will both families gain from trade? And we just saw that. It took a total of 18 hours when the Hatfields were producing by themselves, and it's 16 hours when they produce 2 bushels of corn and trade for the other. So they're saving 2 hours on that. And then the McCoys, it took them 27 hours before they were willing to trade. Now it's only 27 hours before they trade. Now it's 24, so they're able to save 3 hours. So will both families gain in trade? Absolutely. And once again, going back, Hatfields have the absolute advantage in both corn and cloth. But as far as comparative advantage, we would let the Hatfields make the corn, and we'd have the McCoys make the cloth. And both of them are going to gain time. It's going to free up, like I said, 2 hours for the Hatfields, 3 hours for the McCoys, and then everyone should be happy.